We have an absolutely incredible group here for the topic corporate approaches to career development. And I think what you guys will find exciting about this panel is that it's three really impressive folks who come at this topic from different angles, each one of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce my panelists kind of by title only and let them explain their relationship to the topic, because I think their own words will do it a lot more justice than mine will. Lovely to see everyone. My name is Melissa Swift. I'm Mercer's head of transformation solutions for the US and Canada. So, this topic about how do we get entire corporations' skills to change is obviously near and dear to my heart. And I'm really looking forward to learning from this group. So we've got three folks here. We've got Steve Suarez, who's the Global Head of Innovation for Finance, Risk, and Compliance at HSBC. We've got Vipin Gupta, who is the Group Vice President and Chief Innovation and Digital Officer of Toyota Financial Services. And we've got Julie Dervin, who is the Global Head of Learning and Development at Cargill. So three incredible perspectives, and maybe because he's in the top right-hand corner of my screen, I'm going to ask Steve to just explain a little bit about why are you here on this panel? What's your connection to the topic?
Hi, thank you, Melissa. Yeah, no, so I run innovation for global functions here at HSBC. And part of my job is to look for new emerging technologies and how we can implement it at the bank. The bank is over 150 years old. We process about 1.5 trillion transactions a day. And when you're talking about the scope of the bank, we're constantly looking to upskill our people, seeing how we can deal with the latest technologies, the latest processes. And you can't do that without continuously learning. And so that's why I'm very passionate to help our colleagues and help myself and our colleagues to really see how we can make this a better, safer place to do banking and financial services for our industry.
Amazing. Thank you. All right, we'll go to Vipin. Nice to see you again. You are muted.
Okay.
There.
I'm ready now. Sorry for that. So good morning, Melissa. So it was nice to see you last month, and it's a great opportunity to be part of this conversation. So my current role is I'm speaking from Dallas, Texas today, which is the US headquarters for Toyota. And my role here is the Chief Innovation and Digital Officer. I have a broad set of responsibilities. I'm honored to lead this team, which not only is focused around strategy, innovation, transformation, and all aspects of digital IT, cybersecurity, but we also are focused around workplace services and TFS Academy. It's a learning academy that we have created and launched. And so that's another aspect of why I am here, to talk about the talent, talk about what we are seeing in what's changing in the learning landscape. It's fascinating to see what has changed in the learning landscape so rapidly. I believe our learning behaviors have changed. I think we are new kinds of learners. I don't think the new learners think about a linear way of learning. There's a non-linear way of learning. So those are the kind of topics I'm interested in, and how do we bring that to grow the digital savviness of the organization, not just for IT, but for the entire organization of Toyota Financial Services.
Excellent. Excellent. All right, Julie.
Hello, Julie Dervin. I am with Cargill, and I am here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where the Cargill headquarters are. And Melissa, as you mentioned, I'm the Global Head of Learning and Development for Cargill, and this topic couldn't be more timely and relevant for the discussions that we're having inside of Cargill. And, we take our purpose very seriously, and that's to nourish the world in a safe, responsible, and sustainable way. And to do that, things are changing. And, as was just mentioned, the way people learn, the pace at which we need to build new skills, the impacts of external forces such as digital sustainability is significantly changing how we deliver on our purpose. And so, we realize we can't hire our way out of this challenge, that we need to be investing in our current workforce and upskilling, reskilling, new skilling. And the challenge for us is that, we have 160,000 employees in 70 different countries, and some very distinct parts of our workforce that have different needs. And so trying to figure out how we do that at scale, how do we build skills with speed, but how do we do it in a way that aligns with the preferences that our employees have in engaging with learning? So very timely topic.
Excellent. And I love your comment on you can't hire your way out of this. It's very interesting. We actually have some data that I'm fond of talking about, that organizations generally spend about 3 times as much time on talent acquisition than they do on all of talent management, right? Forget learning as a subset of that. And that's completely upside down, I think, in the current context, right? So exactly what you're alluding to. All right, so Julie, maybe we'll start with you, and we'll go in reverse order this time. But we wanted to kind of start off with a little bit of what's the North Star here, right? When you talk about the topic of this panel, right, developing people in the corporate context, silly question, what are you developing them for? What's your North Star for development?
Well, as I thought about that question, you could take it in so many different directions, right? Very specific skills and capabilities that we're looking to build at Cargill, as well as just really what that bigger purpose, that North Star is. And I would say, our vision for learning was shaped a few years ago, and I still think it's very relevant today, which is about strengthening that culture of organizational learning. Not only to meet the challenges of business today, but also to, be able to respond to the challenges that are coming to us in the future that we don't even know about. And when you strengthen that organizational culture and you get that flywheel going, where the organization, from leaders to managers to frontline employees, understand the criticality of continuous learning and always keeping their skills relevant and competitive, then regardless of what is happening around us outside of Cargill, the uncertainty that we are constantly living in, that we are ready to respond because we are constantly building skills, and our employees value it, our managers value it, and our leaders value it.
No, it's fantastic. And I love that emphasis on systemic learning, right? Interwoven into the culture. So Vipin, this is something you're passionate. I mean, you built an academy, right? So talk to us about where do you see your North Star? What is the thing that you're developing toward?
Yeah. I believe that we are kind of embarking on these kind of new generation of skills and competencies. And I think the pace of change of our businesses, all our businesses, have just dramatically increased. We have never seen a pace like this. And so we are focusing on programs that are focused not only just the specialization, but also creating this agility and speed. So I think the future set of skills and competencies are around speed and specialization. That combination is what we are really after. I think agility has to be a core competency of every organization, every individual in the organization. And in addition to that, we are also building people who are more digitally savvy. And I call them more like bilingual, because being digital is no more just IT's job. It's everyone's job. Everyone in our organization needs to understand how they can use their mastery and specialization to harness the power of software to create and realize better results for their functions. So that's where our focus is. How do we kind of introduce speed along with specialization? And then how do we create a bilingual specialization to create a more digital savvy organization and digitally savvy team? And this is not just focused just around what I'll call as employees. We are really focused on all elements of our workforce, employees plus consultants. So that has been one of the, I would call it, approaches to be more comprehensive in how we think about our talent development for the future.
No, it's fantastic. And I love you're picking up on something that Julie mentioned as well, right? Of those 2 tracks of highly specific skills, but then also that overall muscle around agility and speed, right? Being able to hit both of those themes being really, really critical. All right, so Steve, for you, I mean, you have a very interesting role, right? How do you define your North Star, and what is the, kind of the transformation you're seeking to create in terms of learning?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Vipin and Julie, and not to repeat anything, but I'll touch a bit about the uncertainty, and I think this is really what there's been a lot of uncertainty. I think COVID caused a lot of uncertainty in changing ways on how we learn, how we have to adapt, and for us, the learning part is really more around empowering. Right. So people feel uncertain about where they're going, what's the direction, where's the future. And by giving people the ability to upskill themselves and really set a good course trajectory to learn new skills, for us, it's been really focused on how do we empower our employees to take more control of their careers and set the directions for them. Ever since, with COVID happening, and personally, I did it myself. I actually did the MIT ACE course and went through. And where I take joy is seeing people coming back and saying, those courses you're doing or the structure that you're curating for us has been fantastic because it's really made a difference in my current job. Or, I've decided to change my job because now I have the confidence and gain the confidence to be able to move and really pivot my career. And so for us, it's really been around how do we make the learners feel about themselves? How do we empower them? And how do we give them the confidence to pick up new skills and to really push their career trajectory forward?
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I love the emphasis on the emotional element of it. I mean, it's interesting. It's something that pops in a lot of our Mercer research is that whether people stay at an organization or go, a lot of times is this organization growing me, right? And that's a whole kind of emotional halo around the work. It's not just popping open people's brains and pouring stuff in, right? There's a feeling you create. And I love that emphasis on the feeling. So let's get to, kind of now that we've talked a little bit about the vision, some success stories. Vipin, would love to hear about kind of some work that you've been proud of, and what did the outcomes look like, and how did you sort of measure those? How did you think about results in that context?
As I mentioned earlier, we're really proud of this decision we made about 3 years back to launch TFS Academy, and this was just before pandemic had arrived. And this decision turned out to be maybe one of the best decisions, right? It was very timely too at the time, and it's starting to pay dividends now after 3 years. So in 3 years, we have gone through like 50,000 learning experiences across over 5,000 team members, employees and consultants. And the best part is we have about 100 team members who have been given teaching badges. And so the whole idea here was that this is not about just training. It is about really activating learning in the organization. And the way we did that was to create this culture of teaching and a peer teaching, peer learning. And that to me was really fascinating about this. So we call it like learn, do, teach, do, and where our leaders are held accountable to teach about 100 hours a year. And so the part here is that we have experts in our own organization. So one of the questions that we constantly ask each other is, what's your mastery? And the second question is, will you teach this mastery to others? And I think that has a subtle recognition and empowerment, as Steve was talking about, this idea that I have something that I can give to others and I can multiply this. And I think this is where the culture started to build around this academy. And we really started this very organically. We really didn't have any specific measurable goals when we started, frankly. It was just to fill the gap that we realized that we need to train our people. We need to create this learning environment for our people where they're ready for this digital world, this kind of agile way of working. And this started with one institute as part of this academy. And now it has grown into 10 different institutes. Has grown from one country to other countries. So it's organically starting to grow, which kind of proves the point that there is a lot of desire to learn. There is a thirst in our organization to learn and grow. And it connects to your point also, Melissa. This was focused around the people that we already have in the organization. This is not about just focusing on talent acquisition. By the way, Academy has turned out to be a great talking point and a great talent acquisition tool as well. But more importantly, the focus was on the people that we already have in the organization and how do we grow them and lift them towards this future skill sets. So far we are seeing really positive results around Academy.
Amazing. And I echo Abby's comment in the chat. The "what's your mastery" is a wonderful question, and I'm completely stealing that. That's a great way to think about it. So Steve, same question. Give us a little bit of a success story. What did the results look like? How is that showing up?
Yeah, going back to my role, so I really push innovation and open innovation. And to really have open innovation, decentralized innovation that doesn't belong into a central team. We want everybody to believe that they can drive innovation. We have a tagline that says, innovation is not a spectator sport. So don't come to the meetings and just sit back and eat popcorn to watch what's going on. We want people to get engaged. And to do that, we have to give them the tools, right? It's easy enough for us to just go, hey, go out and innovate. And we have to actually give them the tools. And there's a lot of training out there. And people can get overly consumed with going out to YouTube or learning. So what we do is we carefully curate the best and the easiest trainings so that they can get the most out of the information that we provide. We kind of try to take a little bit of the fluff out of some of the trainings so that we know they're very busy and we like to curate. So I'll bring up maybe 3, maybe even 4 programs, and it'll be very quickly. So one of them was a specific program around design thinking that we created with the D School. And that went really well because it went to the 64 countries that we did. And people started liking it so much that they started putting it out on like LinkedIn, and other people picked it up. And I had people saying, hey, I work for this company, but can I get access to this training? So now we have people looking at HSBC and saying, oh, I'd love access to your design thinking training. And they started they're using the hashtag, if any of you guys are on LinkedIn, hashtag HSBC_DT for design thinking. And we have over 11,000 posts of people writing their own testimonial about the experience on how it's helped them both professionally and personally as well, and people talking about it. So I love hearing real live examples, how training has actually made their work life better and made it more impactful. We just launched last week, a course in combination with Oxford around fintechs and decentralized finance, which is really specific and could really disrupt the financial services industry. And so by teaching our colleagues about how that works, how we can get involved, again, it goes back to the empowering. We already have 5,000 people that have signed up, and we just launched it last week. And then doing some very technical stuff like quantum computing, next generation type stuff, where we're training people from beginner to intermediate to very advanced training, actually looking to work with William Oliver out of MIT to really kind of push some of that. So these are just some of the examples. And obviously the latest thing has been the stuff on the metaverse.
That's amazing. So from design thinking all the way to quantum computing, right? That is an incredible spectrum. And I love that you're seeing the response, you're seeing it go viral a bit, right? Again, about the role of, it's not just I got you from here to here on skills. It's about those ecosystem effects that are so much bigger. I think it's really inspiring. So now I'm going to turn to Julie for a question that really is sort of near and dear to my own heart, spending a lot of time in the work that I do grappling with this question of employee preferences are changing, right? People want different things from their jobs, from their work, from their careers than they did in the past. And it always gets framed as millennials. Millennials are nearly 40 by now, people. Like it's not, and by the way, it's every generation, in the population. But Julie, when you think about this question of people want, first of all, how are you guys thinking about what's different in what people want from their careers? And then secondly, how do you then pivot, how you position them in terms of skills to feed that different need?
Mhm. It's a big question. And, and like you referenced, I think the answer to that question is a very personal one, right? And I think historically we look to build, central programs, central initiatives, central strategies that would scale, right? Kind of a one size fits all. This is the job, these are the skills, and this is how that system's going to work. I think today, right, because there's so much opportunity, people want flexibility. They want to know that what they are doing and contributing to organizations ladders up to a purpose that they can get behind and connect with. And they want to constantly be building new skills and then putting those skills to work, right? And so I think that whole idea of personalization is what we are having conversations internally about, is how do you, in an organization the size of Cargill, and I lead a central global function, right? So naturally we have to think about scale, right? Um, but then how do you do that in a very personalized way? And one of the ways that we have been working with, which has been very interesting, and this is an idea that my team actually came up with when we made the shift to a digital first learning strategy about 3-4 years ago, prior to COVID. And so digital first with intentionality about when and why we bring people together for learning, not a digital only strategy. But uh, there's the, yes, of course, you need to align with what the business needs and the organization needs, right? What are the critical skills that will help us live into our purpose, deliver on our strategies, um, you know, uh, do approach work differently, and getting clear on that. But then there's the how do you design the learning experiences where the personalization comes in. And it's not a one size fits all. And we have large parts of our workforce that have no desire to travel and go sit in a classroom for, captive days on end, right? And we have parts of our workforce where it isn't feasible for them to travel. We have parts of our workforce that prefer digital ways of learning. And so one of the things that my team did was, it's a bit of taking a page from the old crowdsourcing type of an approach. And they have cultivated this internal, completely volunteer, employees passionate about learning network that we call, the virtual online training team. And I think it's almost 700 plus employees at this point that have volunteered, raised their hand from across the globe at different levels that my team can tap into. So when we have questions about preferences and how some learning element is designed, or how we configure some sort of technology to create an experience for our learners, and we don't typically know the answer, we go out and we use that network and we pose that question to that network, and they tell us what their preferences are. They tell us how they want to engage with learning, and that helps shape the learning experience that then my team develops and delivers for any specific skill or capability area.
I love that. And there's an ongoing theme here of, if you really do this right, you can get other folks to help you with your job here, which I think is pretty exciting, just in terms of engaging others, getting them to share. And to your point, you don't have to guess, you can ask. And that's wonderful to have that tightly engaged community. So expanding on this theme, right, of all the stuff that's not the things that you directly do. What about, Steve, I'll go to you. What about the on the job piece? How do you motivate people, continuing on kind of your themes about empowerment and innovation in every seat? How do you motivate people to do on the job skills development?
Yeah, and I mean, maybe this might be a bit controversial, Melissa, but the reality is they have to be self-motivated. So people are going to want to do it. What we do is we'd like to entice them, and I think I was going back to that that comment about seeing the posts on LinkedIn and seeing people's testimonial. I can talk and just tell everybody why they should do it or how it's going to help them out. But when they see their peers and the impact it's having for their peers, I think that's a lot more convincing. And so by showing examples of people that have done the course or doing the training, and they've actually had a step change or something where it's visibly a benefit to them, I think that's what's going to motivate people to really make the difference. You know, it's funny, I'm sure all of our organizations have free training, there's free this, there's free that, but it does require a little bit of self-motivation, and sometimes it's frustration. And I know for myself, I was frustrated and I wanted to change and I wanted to do something different. And I could sit back and kind of blame the world on why things weren't working in the way I was. But then, you know, part of it is taking control and self-directing myself, say, look, I'm going to make a change. Is it going to pay off? I don't know, but I'm going to do something about it. And actually doing that to me has been very empowering. So I hope to motivate others by leading by example, having conversations, seminars like this, kind of talking about it and showing that by doing this, I do it myself. I practice what I preach. I'm constantly looking for upskilling myself. And if people see the value and see that it actually does help and does help you move up, I think to me, that's the best motivation because people are frustrated. There's a lot of insecurity out there, and giving people an outlet, I think is upskilling is, there's nothing better.
Wow, that's fascinating. The frustration as a motivator is an interesting one because it's something I just this week handed in a book. And one of the things I talk about in the book is frustrating work. And there's some research out of Europe that shows that 97% of people are frustrated on the job, right? So if you want a universal motivator, right? I mean, I worry about the other 3%, to be honest, like what, maybe they just tick the wrong box. But I think it is a wonderful thing to tap into because we always think about, you know, positive emotions and personal growth, but, you know, sometimes it is like, oh, this is driving me crazy. And maybe if I upskill myself, there's a different path. So I think it's a wonderful insight. Vipin, I'll put the same question to you. How do you get people going to really develop themselves on the job?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with Steve. I think some of it has to be really self-motivated, self-driven. But I also believe in this idea that you can't bring the horse to the water, but you can make the horse thirsty. So that horse will walk to the water, right? So how do we activate learning is basically, I think, I think that's the real question is how do we do that? And I think this idea of focusing on teaching, idea of recognizing that you have something that you can give to others is the biggest motivator. And I think what we have found is very fascinating is I don't think we were doing, or initially we were doing this by design, but it just happened that way, that more and more we talked about this, what's your mastery? What can you teach others? It actually created this learning environment and thirst for learning. Because a couple of things happened because of that. One is you self-realize that there are gaps that you can fill and you can create more mastery. So you're kind of softly setting a goal to be a master at something. Second is most of these, I think sometimes we make a mistake. We think of learning and development as if it's for the lower ranks of the organization. But I think the top ranks of the organization need to be the role model for learning. And I think the teaching question or the mastery question drives a top-down behavior. And when they see the top of the organization engaged in learning and teaching, I think the rest of the organization starts to get motivated. So a little bit of that, I think this constantly asking this question, what's your mastery? Where do you want to build your mastery? Where do you want to multiply your mastery? I think that indirectly creates this sense of learning more. And then obviously there is a subtle reward to this whole idea of, I think if you learn, there is a definite correlation to growth in the organization, as we talked about. And I think it also reduces the frustration, as we talked about. But it's really the motivating idea here is, or motivating factor is to focus on driving or creating a supporting environment that helps you be better at what you do or learn something new. And I think that really creates a motivation for learning for most of the organization.
Wonderful. And Julie, you wanted to chime in there.
Yes. I just think what both Steve and Vipin said is so important. And there were two really key things that are so true in Cargill as well, which is, Steve talked about being a role model, right? And being a role model for, continuous learning and always keeping your skills relevant and competitive. And also, Vipin talked about, what I call, and it's a less formal of making continuous learning in vogue, right? If the employees look up and they see the leaders prioritizing learning, the leaders are inspiring the organization to why we have to continue to build our skills, keep them sharp, keep them relevant. And here's how it connects to our purpose and our mission. Then that starts to cultivate that self-motivation. What we found at Cargill is just, leaving it up to employees and saying, well, only the self-motivated are the ones that are going to succeed, just doesn't work, right? Because employees want to know why. How does it connect? They want to, look at their leaders in the organization and understand, is this critical and is this important for me to allocate time towards? Because employees are busy. None of us have time to even fit in everything we need to do in a given day in a given week. But when I see my leader and hear my leader talking about how critical learning and skill building is for the future and their ability to execute their strategy, now all of a sudden the employee is going to start making trade-off decisions. And one of those priorities becomes learning and investing in themselves.
No, I love that. I love the emphasis on role modeling. And I think, something that Vipin was saying too about all the best learners I know are also great teachers. And really seeing those two halves of the coin together, there's something powerful, and it's coming out in all three of your comments. And I think it's fascinating. I'll also put in a cool thing that we've been doing at Mercer is we do one learning day a quarter. And so that, number one, it gives a good message about dedicated space for learning, but also that role modeling where people see their leaders engaging in learning, right? It sends a really nice message. So Julie, I'll actually
I think we lost Melissa.
Oh, okay. I thought you guys lost me for a while there.
I know. I was worried it was me.
All right. It looks like she was going to ask you a question. Should somebody step in and ask the question here? I was looking at the questions. Maybe, well, Julie, why don't I ask you? And then as soon as she gets back, and hopefully.
Let's do it.
All right. So what's the one thing that surprises you about learning landscape over the past few years?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest surprises has been, we were on this digital learning transformation well before COVID, thank goodness. And so, we were ready to move into fully remote workforce and, luckily didn't skip a beat as it related to learning and making learning accessible to our employees because of that strategy. However, through COVID, right, the only option because of the constraints was digital. So we got used to that in 2 years, right, of just only digital options for how employees can engage in learning. Now the constraints are lifting, right? And so now we're coming back to more flexibility. And what's so interesting is we're hearing a lot of leaders and employees with this really, really strong desire to come back together physically and learn, in a common place. And so, we got so used to this, digital way of learning that now we're having to figure out, okay, well, what is the right mix of digital and in person, and how do we make those decisions And so I think what surprises me is just how strong the need is coming back to bringing people together for peer and collective learning opportunities.
It's crazy on human behavior. First, we were like, oh, we all have to go digital because we've got to work from home. And I was like, oh, I can't do that. And then now that we've gotten used to that, oh, we got to go back to the office and so it's just where it's a constant change, and it just kind of shows how, how we get used to something and then we can move forward. Looks like you're back,
Right.
Melissa, so I'll hand you back the microphone.
Thank you. Sorry, my home unstable internet, never a dull moment, but luckily, my part of my personal learning agility is figuring out how to do the stuff on my phone. So thank you, Julie, for jumping in there about the question about the modalities. And I agree. I think it's such an interesting journey of continuous switching. So I'll actually, a question for Vipin. What do, as you deal with an array of leaders, right, around your organization, what do you think is often not understood about kind of that skills building journey within the organization? Or what do you think your peer leaders are often surprised by, maybe?
I think this idea that learning is a continuous process, right? It's not a training. There's a difference between training and learning, right? So the learning is a continuous process. We have to stay on it. We cannot take the foot off the gas pedal, if you will. And I think then do it in a way that it is more comprehensive. I think this is another piece. I think this idea that when it's a training, it's kind of a long session, maybe goes on for a few days, and then you're done, and then you expect the individual to kind of learn from there on their own. But I think today's learner is very different in my view. I think it's a non-linear learning that is taking place. Our learners can go to different sources to get information, get content. So how do we turn this into these short incremental learning modules in small batches, and then complement it with some kind of a coaching along with it? And I think this idea of training and coaching and then maintaining that momentum throughout in this kind of a continuous journey, I think is really sometimes that we miss. Another part of this is also, I think we think that learning and development is HR's job, human resources department's job. That's the farthest from practicality and truth. I think it is everyone's job. I think it is, as a leader, we need to be spending a lot of time continuously thinking about how do we grow our people. And I think the leaders who actually focus on teaching and learning and coaching their teams tend to also build the best and the strongest teams. And I think those are the couple of things that we typically miss, that it's a continuous long haul. And second is it is not HR's job, it is our job.
Fantastic. Julie and Steve, anything you would add to that list of, what surprises other leaders about that learning journey?
You want to go first, Julie, or you want me to go?
Go ahead, Steve.
No, I mean, it's funny. Sometimes you get, well, what are the metrics or what's the ROI? And when you talk about learning, sometimes you can't put an ROI on making somebody's life better or making them, come to work with a twinkle in their eye. I've had people come back to me and say, you know what, if I wouldn't have gotten involved in this, I probably would have left the bank 2 years ago. And how do I capture that in some of my metrics and ROI? So sometimes we get stuck on, okay, well, I want to see what the return on investment is. And it's hard to kind of capture some of those metrics for people that just want to see those ROIs. And I often tell them, look, what's the alternative? Do you want employees that are not trained and don't have anything? Of course not, right? So that's kind of the focus when sometimes I struggle to, when people see learning as a cost instead of a benefit to the future.
And to build on to that, I would say, when there is a performance issue recognized in the business, we still get a lot of, well, they need to be trained. Well, they need education, they need learning, right? It's always the first go-to. When the organization or an area or a team is not performing the way that the leader expects, well, then we need to train them. And so, we've been having this conversation with leaders 2 decades ago, 1 decade ago, and it's still going on today, which is before we jump in to, designing some sort of learning experience for your employees, let's step back and really understand what's going on, what's happening in your business that is signaling there's a performance issue. And having really good questions to help that leader really peel back and get to the root of the issue, which then actually helps that leader come to their own conclusion about, well, what is it, right, that's creating the issue? And a lot of times it's not a skill gap. It's not a training issue. It's something in the system, in the environment, in the reward process, whatever it may be. And so I think it still surprises me that we're still, having those conversations that training is the solve for all performance issues.
Yeah, absolutely. That really resonates for me just in a lot of my own work. One of the themes that consistently emerges is leaders don't necessarily know what's in the work of their teams, right? So when you start from that fundamental disconnect between, and that's where I like some of these things about mastery and teaching and getting leaders' heads in the games differently, right? But if you don't know what your team's work really looks like, it's very easy to say, well, okay, they just need to be trained more, right? Because you're starting from sort of a baseline of low information. And then that feeds through to, to Steve's point about ROI, et cetera, then, fundamentally, how would you measure outcomes if you're not understanding kind of what point A is to point B in very foundational terms. So before we go to our last question, I think we have, and my apologies because I cannot see the Q&A, but someone has given me the Q&A in the chat. Before we go to our closing question, a good question from the chat. As large employers, when you think about kind of this question, and again, this is one near and dear to my own heart, micro certifications versus traditional degrees, and then the whole world in between. How are you looking at that piece? This is one where I see clients evolving very fast.
I can go ahead and jump in. I tell you, I love micro certifications because I think it goes back to, we got people that are really busy, they've got their day jobs, they got everything. And the more we can get that content through, we're doing a lot probably in 2 areas around cloud-based computing. We're doing a lot of technology moving to the cloud and pushing people with that type of training. Same thing around the AI and machine learning. There's a lot of work, obviously, in the bank that we're doing in these 2 areas. And if we can specialize that and give them that, by getting these micro certifications, that actually motivates them. We were talking earlier, how do they get motivated? I mean, if you just need to turn on LinkedIn and you could see people posting about the latest certification they got or putting it on kind of their credentials, or Vipin mentioned about badges. These are kind of some of the gamification or things that people want to show off. And in the past, before COVID, you could tell people about it, be by the water cooler and say, oh, I did this certification, whatever. Right now, the water cooler is kind of social media and LinkedIn is saying, hey guys, I just got this certification. And what that prompts other people to do is like, oh, tell me about it, or I want to do it. And it goes back leading by example. If you're doing it, imagine the people under you saying, oh, look at what my boss had done. Let me, do something similar and motivate them to do that. So I'm a big proponent of micro certifications.
Yeah, I would offer, I think there is a case for, the traditional degree and micro certifications, depending on what it is we're talking about. But, the micro certifications, I think are so critical in today's day and age where skills are evolving so fast, and technologies and our ability to capitalize on the new technology advancements. This is changing the skills that our employees need so fast. So when you think about the time it takes to get a traditional degree, you know, depending on how technical and how specific that degree gets, by the time you come out with that degree, the world has changed, right? And the corporations have to upskill you anyways. And so, but I do think with the traditional degrees, there are some really, really important skill sets that are transferable, regardless of how certain technical or specialized skills are changing. So things like problem solving, critical thinking, curiosity, leadership, interpersonal skills, all of these transferable competencies that regardless of what is changing in those specialized areas, that those micro certifications can really help upskill, serves as a really sustainable foundation for employees.
Excellent. Vipin, your thoughts on micro certifications, traditional degrees?
Yeah, I would say I kind of evolved my thinking over the last few years. I think I wasn't a huge fan of micro certifications, but I see a huge value now. I think what I was saying earlier, which is I think the way we learn has changed. And I think certifications are a way to, I think, recognize and also gain kind of that narrow mastery or knowledge that you need on demand when you need it. And I think certification becomes a way to demonstrate that you have gone after that narrow skill set and learned it on your own. And I think that's quite a big motivating factor, as Steve said earlier, which is these certifications are not only the badges of honor, but I think it also demonstrates that that self-learning ability of that individual. And I think that is, to me, that is highly valuable. So I'm a huge fan of micro certifications.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And again, this is one of those things where kind of a meta theme of the panel is the balance of the two, right? Because to your point, micro certifications are motivating and they help you with specific skills. But then to Julie's point, right, the sort of classical education model imparts certain critical thinking skills that we also value increasingly more and more. I mean, I think it's an interesting thought question. Something like 60% of jobs in the United States require a college degree. And when you require a college degree, the diversity of the pool you draw from already drops, right? From that one bullet in the job description, one bullet, right? So it's worth thinking a lot about, and there's no pre-prepared right answer, but what is that exact mix of skills you're really looking for in any given work? Because I think to your point, both ends of the spectrum have something to contribute. And then we had a good question in the chat. Well, let's do just kind of a quick rapid fire on this one, and then we'll get to our closing question. But there was a question in the chat about innovation and on-the-job training, around things, apprenticeships, et cetera, et cetera. What are you guys seeing or doing that's interesting in that regard?
Yeah, I think for us, I think I would say on the job training is actually an extremely critical element of what we do. Like it's part of what we'll call as coaching on specific skills that are in the specific context of our organization. I think that's basically what we're talking about when we talk about on the job training. And again, largely, I think I go back to this whole idea of connecting teachers with the learners, right? So in the on-the-job training, again, it can't be just a training. It has to be an on-the-job learning experience. And there's, again, difference between training and learning here, which basically means having an on-the-job learning experience with the right coach, where it is more important that the manager, the supervisors are also equally trained and coached on how to coach the on-the-job training, if you will, or on-the-job learner. So I think it is, again, it's an intense, in my view, it's an intense process where we have to focus on the environment that allows that on-the-job learner to flourish. Otherwise, it just becomes another training program. It doesn't really yield the results that we are expecting from such programs.
I agree. Sorry, Melissa, I agree with Vipin. I mean, when it comes to innovation, innovation is about doing experiments and trying things out. And you're constantly failing. And through that failure, you're learning a lot. You're learning what works, what doesn't work. And so when it comes to innovation, the fact that you're experimenting and you're trying to innovate to new things, you might not be happy, but failure failure educates, and that's why getting that experimentation and like I said earlier, innovation is not a spectator sport. If you're getting your hands dirty, you're learning, and I think that's kind of the on-the-job learning that we provide when we get involved in innovation.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, we've got to wrap, but I wanted to see if you could each give maybe in one quick sentence what you're most excited about in, you know, kind of the learning that you're creating and driving for the next 5 years. So single sentence. We'll start with Julie.
I would say the advancements of these new marketplace technologies that can help facilitate on-the-job training, on-the-job developmental experiences, and open up these experiences, making them much more visible to employees than we've ever had the opportunity.
Fantastic. All right, Vipin.
Yeah, for me, I think this just the realization that most of the businesses and corporations are having that learning is an essential part of our business strategy. So education has to be part of the business strategies. We have to be the education centers of the future. And I think that's what everyone is starting to realize. And to me, that's very exciting.
Excellent. All right, Steve, and then we will close.
It's for me, it's the convergence of e-learning, augmented reality, and virtual reality. I think virtual reality and augmented reality is going to disrupt the education and the learning like no other technology has before.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys so much. I could spend hours with this panel. You guys are super, I think, interesting and inspiring, and have really articulated a vision of kind of ecosystem-wide learning that just resonates for me incredibly. So thank you so much. And I'm going to hand off to Kathleen Kennedy from the MIT Center for Collective Intelligence for the next panel. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.